The planet Valera was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Its skies shimmered with hues of violet and gold, as though an artist's brushstroke painted the heavens every morning. Towering crystalline trees stretched high into the atmosphere, their translucent leaves chiming softly in the breeze like wind chimes made of glass. Rivers glowed faintly under the sun's binary pair that bathed the land in warm, golden light. It was beautiful, almost otherworldly, but it wasn't home. Not yet. Humans were newcomers here. Refugees fleeing a dying Earth after centuries of neglect had turned their blue-green cradle into a wasteland. They arrived on Valora not as conquerors or explorers, but as beggars, pleading for sanctuary. The Valorans, an advanced species whose sleek silver cities floated above the ground on beams of energy, allowed them to settle on one condition. Humans would live only in the barren outskirts, far from the heart of Valoran civilization. There, they eked out a meager existence, farming rocky soil and scavenging resources while trying to rebuild what little they could. To the Valorans, humans were little more than pests. Tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered like liquid metal, the Valorans moved through life with an effortless elegance that made humans seem clumsy by comparison. Their voices carried a musical quality when they spoke, each word precise and deliberate. They called humans the flickers, a term laced with disdain. To them, human lives were fleeting, fragile things like sparks from a fire, bright for a moment before fading away. Among these settlers was Daniel Cade, a quiet man in his early 30s who worked tirelessly to provide for his small community. He wasn't particularly remarkable. He didn't have grand visions of heroism or dreams of changing the galaxy. But Daniel had a sharp mind and a knack for solving problems, even if no one noticed most of the time. On this particular day, however, something unusual caught his attention as he walked back from repairing a water filtration system at the edge of their settlement. Daniel spotted her, a Valorant woman, standing near the glowing riverbank. She was breathtakingly beautiful, her metallic skin reflecting the light in dazzling patterns, her long limbs moving with an ethereal grace. Her hair flowed like liquid mercury down her back, catching the sunlight in ways that seemed almost magical. Daniel froze, unable to look away. "She's gorgeous," he whispered softly to himself, unaware that his voice carried just enough over the gentle hum of the environment. He shook his head, chuckling nervously at his own foolishness. "I wish I had a wife like her." But then, something unexpected happened. The Valoran woman turned sharply toward him, her luminous eyes locking onto his. For a moment, Daniel thought, he must be imagining things. There was no way she could have heard him from where she stood. Yet, there was no mistaking the intensity of her gaze. She tilted her head slightly, studying him as though he was some strange creature she'd never encountered before. "Did you speak?" she asked, her voice melodic yet tinged with curiosity. Daniel's face flushed red. Of all the scenarios he'd imagined during his brief infatuation, being caught ogling her and worse, complimenting her aloud wasn't one of them. Stammering, he tried to explain himself. I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just..." Her expression shifted subtly, a flicker of amusement crossing her features. "You find me attractive?" she asked bluntly, cutting straight to the point. If possible, Daniel felt even more flustered. "Well, yeah, I guess so. You're kind of hard to miss." Instead of dismissing him or laughing outright as many Valorants might have done, she stepped closer, her movements fluid and deliberate. Up close, she was even more striking, her presence commanding in a way that left Daniel feeling both awestruck and deeply uncomfortable. "My name is Syra," she said, her tone softer now. "And you are?" "Daniel," he replied quickly, still struggling to compose himself. "Just Daniel." Syra studied him for another long moment before speaking again. "Your kind rarely speaks to us directly. Why did you—" Before Daniel could answer, a low rumble echoed across the landscape, drawing both their attention. In the distance, one of the floating Valoran cities began to descend slowly toward the ground, its underside glowing brighter than usual. It was rare for the cities to come this close to human settlements, and the sight filled Daniel with unease. "What's happening?" he asked, turning back to Sylrr. Her expression darkened, and for the first time, Daniel saw something akin to concern. In her eyes, "Something has changed," she murmured cryptically. Then, without another word, she turned and began walking toward the descending city, leaving Daniel standing alone by the riverbank. Confused but intrigued, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was about to happen would change everything for him, for humanity, and perhaps even for the Valerans themselves. The next morning, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Syra. Her presence lingered in his mind like the faint glow of Velora's twin suns after sunset. He replayed their brief encounter over and over, her piercing gaze, her melodic voice, the way she had seemed genuinely curious about him. It was strange, almost unsettling, because Valerans rarely acknowledged humans unless it was to issue orders or express disdain. Yet Syra had been different. She hadn't mocked him or dismissed him outright. Instead, she had listened as he worked on repairing a broken irrigation pump near the edge of the settlement. Daniel found himself glancing toward the glowing river where they'd met. The descending city from the previous day still hovered ominously nearby, its lights flickering faintly against the violet sky. Whatever it signified, it couldn't be good. Rumors were already spreading among the settlers, whispers of increased patrols, stricter resource quotas, and even talk of relocation. No one knew what the Valerans were planning, but everyone agreed it wasn't going to benefit humanity. Daniel's thoughts were interrupted when a shadow fell across him. Looking up, he saw a group of 3 settlers approaching. Mara, the outspoken leader of their small community. Elias, a wiry mechanic with a knack for improvisation. And Lila, a quiet but observant farmer who always seemed to notice things others missed. "Daniel," Mara said, her tone brisk but not unkind. "We need your help. Something's happening at the river." "What do you mean?" Daniel asked, setting down his tools. "It's the Valerans," Elias chimed in, scratching the back of his neck nervously. "They've set up some kind of device. Big thing. Looks like a tower made of crystal. We don't know what it does, but it's right on the border of our land." Daniel frowned. Why would they put something there? That area's too rocky to farm, and the soil's no good for anything. "That's the thing," Lila said quietly. "It's not just the device. There are guards posted around it more than usual, and they're watching us closely." Mara crossed her arms, her expression grim. "Whatever this is, it's not random. We need to figure out what they're up to before it's too late." Daniel hesitated. He wasn't sure how much help he could be, but curiosity and a growing sense of unease pushed him to agree. "All right, let's check it out." The 4 of them made their way cautiously toward the riverbank, staying low to avoid drawing attention. When they reached the edge of the forest, they crouched behind a cluster of crystalline bushes and peered through the shimmering foliage. Sure enough, there it was, a towering structure of translucent crystal pulsing faintly with light. Around it stood several Valeran guards, their metallic forms gleaming under the sunlight. "What do you think it is?" Elias whispered. "No idea," Daniel replied, squinting, "but it doesn't look friendly." Before anyone could respond, a soft voice spoke behind them. "You shouldn't be here." They all turned sharply, hearts racing, to find Syra standing just a few feet away. She looked as composed as ever, though there was a hint of tension in her posture. "Syra," Daniel said, rising slowly to his feet. "We didn't mean to intrude. We just wanted to understand what's going on." Her luminous eyes scanned the group, lingering briefly on each face before returning to Daniel. "This isn't your concern," she said firmly. "Go back to your settlement now." Mara stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. "With all due respect, it is our concern. That device is on our land, or what little of it we have left. If it affects us, we deserve answers." For a moment, Syra said nothing. Then, to everyone's surprise, she sighed, softly, a sound so human that it caught them off guard. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," she murmured. "Us," Daniel urged, taking a step closer. Syra hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the crystal tower. Finally, she spoke. "That device monitors energy fluctuations. It's part of an experiment, one that could alter the balance of power on Valera." "What kind of experiment?" Lila asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't say more," Syra replied, shaking her head. "But I will tell you this. If successful, it will change everything for both our peoples." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Before anyone could press further, one of the Valoran guards called out sharply, noticing Silra's presence. She glanced back at the group, her expression unreadable. "Leave now," she said quietly, "and don't come back here. For your own safety." With that, she turned and walked swiftly toward the tower, leaving the humans staring after her in stunned silence. "Well," Mara said finally, breaking the tension, "that was something. She knows more than she's letting on." Daniel muttered, his brow furrowed in thought. Elias nodded. Yeah, but the real question is, what are we gonna do about it? No one had an answer, not yet. But as they retreated back to the settlement, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that Silra's warning carried more urgency than she'd let on. Whatever the Valorans were planning, it wasn't just about monitoring energy. And somehow, humanity was caught in the middle of it. The days that followed were tense. The settlers tried to go about their daily routines, repairing equipment, tending crops, and rationing supplies, but the looming presence of the Crystal Tower cast a shadow over everything. Whispers of fear and frustration spread like wildfire through the small community. Some argued that they should confront the Valorans directly, demanding answers. Others believed it was better to stay quiet and hope the issue resolved itself. Without bloodshed, Daniel found himself caught between these two extremes. On one hand, he understood Mara's fiery determination to stand up for their rights. They had been pushed around long enough, treated as little more than pests on a planet that wasn't theirs, but which they desperately needed to survive. On the other hand, he couldn't ignore Silra's warning or the look in her eyes when she'd told them to leave. She hadn't sounded malicious or dismissive, the way most Valorans did when addressing humans. Instead, there had been something else in her voice, concern. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in streaks of orange and violet, Daniel sat alone by the edge of the settlement, staring at the distant glow of the Crystal Tower. He replayed his brief conversation with Syra over and over in his mind, searching for clues he might have missed. What experiment was she referring to? And why would it affect both humans and Valorans? His thoughts were interrupted when Elias approached, carrying a battered toolbox under one arm. Still obsessing over that tower? The mechanic asked, plopping down beside him. Not obsessing, Daniel replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. Just trying to figure out what we're dealing with. Well, good luck with that, Elias said with a wry grin. If I didn't know any better, I'd say you've got a soft spot for our shiny friend out there. Daniel shot him. Claire, it's not like that. She's complicated. Elias laughed softly. Complicated? Ha, that's one way to put it. But seriously, man, we need to do something. Sitting around isn't gonna cut it. Before Daniel could respond, Lila appeared, her face pale and drawn. Guys, you need to come see this. They followed her back, to the center of the settlement, where Mara stood next to a crude projection screen made from salvaged materials. Projected onto it was a grainy image captured by a droner, close-up view of the Crystal Tower, surrounded by Valoran guards. But what caught everyone's attention was the faint shimmer surrounding the base of the structure. It looked almost like a barrier, pulsating with an eerie golden light. What is that? Daniel asked, stepping closer. We don't know, Mara admitted, her voice tight with worry. But whatever it is, it's growing stronger every day. Look at this. She tapped a button, and the image shifted to show readings taken by the drone's sensors. Energy levels were spiking dramatically near the tower. This can't be natural, Elias muttered, scratching his head. Something big is happening here, and it's happening fast, Leela added quietly. Too fast for us to ignore. Mara turned to face the group, her expression resolute. We can't wait anymore. If the Valorans are experimenting with something dangerous, we need to act now, not just for ourselves, but for everyone living on this planet. But how? Daniel asked. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and completely outmatched. Even if we wanted to fight back, we don't have the tools or the knowledge to take them on. To his surprise, Leela spoke up. Maybe we don't need to fight them directly. Maybe we just need to understand what they're doing and use that against them. Everyone turned to look at her, intrigued but skeptical. She's right, Daniel said slowly, his mind racing. If we knew more about the experiment, maybe we could find a way to stop it or, at least protect ourselves. Elias raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do you plan to get that information? Walk up to the tower and ask nicely? No, Daniel replied, a determined glint in his eye. I think I know someone who might help us. That night, Daniel returned to the riverbank, hoping against hope that Syra would be there. To his relief and slight apprehension, she appeared moments after he arrived, stepping out from behind a cluster of crystalline trees. You came back, she said, her voice tinged with both surprise and disapproval. I had to, Daniel replied, meeting her gaze. Please, Syla, tell me what's really going on. She hesitated, her luminous eyes searching his face. For a moment, Daniel thought she might refuse. Then, With a sigh, she nodded. The experiment, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, is designed to amplify energy fields to harness power beyond anything we've ever achieved. But it comes at a cost. What kind of cost? Daniel pressed. Syra looked away, her expression troubled. Energy isn't limitless. If the experiment succeeds, it will destabilize the environment. Whole ecosystems could collapse, including those your people depend on. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. And you're okay with that? No, she snapped, her composure cracking for the first time. I'm not, but my people, they don't see it that way. To them, humanity is expendable. Her words hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of just how precarious their situation truly was. As Daniel processed what she'd said, one thing became clear. If humanity wanted to survive, they would have to rely on their own ingenuity and, perhaps, on allies like SYLRA. For the first time since arriving on Valera, Daniel felt a spark of hope. It was fragile, uncertain, but it was there. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough. The revelation from Syra weighed heavily on Daniel. It wasn't just the enormity of what she'd shared, it was the burden of responsibility that came with it. If the settlers did nothing, the experiment would proceed unchecked, and the consequences could be catastrophic. But if they acted, they risked angering the Valerans even further, possibly sparking a conflict they couldn't win. Either way, humanity's survival hung in the balance. When Daniel returned to the settlement, he found the others gathered around Mara, who was pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Her frustration was palpable, her hands clenched into fists as she spoke. We can't keep sitting here waiting for them to make their move, she exclaimed. Every second we waste gives them more time to finish whatever they're building, and rushing in blind won't help us either, Leela countered calmly, though her tone carried an edge of urgency. We need a plan, a smart one. Daniel stepped forward, drawing everyone's attention. I think I have an idea, but it's risky. Risky is better than hopeless, Elias muttered, leaning against the nearby wall. Taking a deep breath, Daniel explained what Syra had told him about the experiment, had her concerns regarding its potential fallout. He also revealed something else. Syra seemed willing to help, at least indirectly. She hadn't outright offered assistance, but her willingness to share information suggested she might be sympathetic to their cause. So, let me get this straight, Mara said slowly, crossing her arms. You want us to trust one who's part of the same people trying to destroy our home? She's not like the others, Daniel insisted. She warned us about the experiment. That has to count for something. Mara frowned, but didn't argue further. Instead, she turned to the group. Assuming we can work with her, what's the plan? Daniel hesitated before speaking. Syra mentioned that the crystal tower amplifies energy fields. If we can disrupt those fields even temporarily, we might buy ourselves enough time to figure out how to stop the experiment altogether. How do you propose we do that? Leela asked skeptically. We don't exactly have access to advanced technology. We use what we do have, Daniel replied, his voice gaining confidence. Our ingenuity, our adaptability, those are strengths the Valerans underestimate. We've survived worse odds before. Elias raised an eyebrow. Okay, but where do we start? That night, the settlers huddled together in the dim glow of a makeshift lantern, brainstorming ideas. Drawing on their collective knowledge, they devised a daring plan. Using salvaged parts from old machinery, they would construct a device capable of emitting a low-frequency pulse designed to interfere with the energy field surrounding the tower. It was crude and untested, but it was all they had. Over the next few days, the entire community pitched in. Mara coordinated efforts, assigning tasks based on each person's skills. Elias tinkered tirelessly with the device, testing and retesting its components while muttering under his breath. Lila scouted the area around the tower, gathering intelligence on patrol patterns and guard positions. Meanwhile, Daniel maintained contact with Syra, feeding her updates and seeking advice when needed. Though cautious, Syra proved invaluable. She provided subtle hints about the tower's design and vulnerabilities, always careful not to reveal too much. If my people discover I'm helping you, she warned during one meeting, there will be consequences. We understand, Daniel assured her, and we appreciate everything you're doing. Finally, after countless sleepless nights and moments of doubt, the device was ready. It was bulky and far from elegant, housed in a metal frame cobbled together from scrap. But it worked, at least in theory. On the eve of their operation, the settlers gathered once more, their faces etched with determination. Mara addressed the group, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "This isn't just about saving ourselves," she said firmly. "It's about proving that we're more than what they think we are. Humanity doesn't give up. Not now, not ever." As silence fell over the group, Daniel felt a surge of pride and fear. They were about to take on forces far greater than themselves, armed only with scraps and sheer willpower. Yet, in that moment, he realized something profound. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't its tools or technology, it was its heart. At dawn, the team moved into position near the crystal tower, hidden behind dense crystalline foliage. They watched as Valoran guards patrolled the perimeter. The air buzzed with anticipation, every sound amplified by nerves stretched taut. "Ready," Elias whispered, adjusting the controls on the device. "As will ever be," Daniel replied, gripping the makeshift activation lever tightly. With a nod, Elias powered up the machine. A faint hum filled the air, growing louder as the device began emitting its pulse. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the golden barrier surrounding the tower flickered just slightly, but enough to catch the attention of the Valoran guards. "What is this?" one of them demanded, their melodic voice tinged with alarm. Before anyone could react, the barrier destabilized completely, collapsing in a shower of sparks. The sudden disruption sent shockwaves through the area, causing the ground to tremble. Beneath their feet, in the chaos that followed, Daniel caught a glimpse of Syra standing near the edge of the clearing. Her expression was unreadable, but there was no mistaking the look of quiet admiration in her eyes. For the first time, the Valorans were forced to confront the truth. Humanity wasn't as weak or insignificant as they'd assumed, and that realization would change everything. The collapse of the golden barrier sent shockwaves, not just through the ground but through the entire dynamic between humans and Valorans. For a moment, time seemed to freeze as both sides processed what had happened. The Valoran guards, their sleek forms shimmering under the twin suns, stared at the now dormant crystal tower in stunned silence. Their melodic voices rose in sharp, discordant tones, exchanging urgent words that carried an unmistakable note of panic. Daniel and his team crouched low behind the crystalline bushes, hearts pounding as they watched the scene unfold. The device Elias had built, a jumble of salvaged parts and makeshift wiring, had worked far better than any of them had dared hope. But success came with a price. They had revealed themselves, and there was no turning back now. "What do we do next?" Lila whispered, her wide eyes darting nervously toward the Valorans. "We stick to the plan," Mara replied firmly, though her clenched fists betrayed her tension. "We hold our ground until we figure out how to disable the tower completely." Elias adjusted the controls on the device, sweat beading on his forehead. "I can try ramping up the pulse again, but it might fry the circuits or worse. Draw more attention." "Then don't," Daniel said quickly, his mind racing. "We've already shown them we're not powerless. Now we need to show them we're willing to fight for what matters." As if on cue, one of the Valoran guards turned sharply in their direction, their luminous gaze piercing through the foliage. "Intruders," the guard called out, raising a slender weapon that glowed faintly with energy. Before anyone could react, several other guards converged on their position, surrounding the settlers with weapons drawn. Daniel raised his hands slowly, signaling for the others to do the same. There was no point resisting, not yet. Outnumbered and outgunned, they would have to rely on something else: diplomacy, courage, or sheer audacity. A figure stepped forward from among the guards, taller and more regal than the rest. Her metallic skin gleamed like molten silver, and her presence commanded immediate authority. This was clearly someone important, a leader, perhaps even the architect of the experiment itself. "You dare interfere with our work?" she asked, her voice smooth yet laced with disdain. "Do you realize the consequences of your actions?" Mara stepped forward boldly, meeting the Valoran's gaze without flinching. "We know exactly what your work entails, and we won't let you destroy this planet, or us, to satisfy your greed." The Valoran leader tilted her head slightly, studying Mara with an expression that bordered on amusement. "Greed? You misunderstand. We seek progress, advancement, a future greater than anything you could comprehend." "And at what cost?" Daniel interjected, stepping beside Mara. His voice trembled slightly, but he forced himself to speak clearly. "You're willing to sacrifice ecosystems, lives, everything, for power you don't even need. For a moment, the leader's composure faltered, replaced by a flicker of irritation. Then, unexpectedly, Syra emerged from the crowd of guards, her movements calm but deliberate. "They're right," she said, addressing the leader directly. "This experiment is reckless. If we continue, we risk destabilizing the entire planet, not just their settlement, but ours as well." The leader's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Syra, you disappoint me. I thought you understood the necessity of progress." "I understand survival," Syra countered, her voice steady, despite the weight of the accusation. "And this path leads only to destruction." The air grew heavy with tension as the two Valorans locked gazes, their silent standoff crackling with unspoken conflict. The guards shifted uneasily, unsure where their loyalties lay, seizing the opportunity. Daniel addressed the assembled Valorans. "You see us as weak, primitive, unworthy of respect. But look around you. We've survived against impossible odds, adapted to a world that wasn't ours, and found ways to thrive despite everything thrown at us. That's not weakness, that's strength. And maybe you could learn something from us." His words hung in the air, met with stunned silence. Even the guards lowered their weapons slightly, their expressions softening as doubt crept into their minds. The leader, however, remained unmoved. "Your words are clever, human, but they mean nothing without action. Show me proof that your kind is worth sparing." It was a challenge, one that left Daniel and his companions scrambling for a response. How could they prove their worth to a species that had dismissed them for so long? Then Leela spoke up, her quiet voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Let us help you fix this. Together, we can find another way, a solution that doesn't harm anyone." The suggestion caught everyone off guard, including the settlers. Yet, as Daniel looked at Syra, he saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. Perhaps unity, not division, was the key to resolving the crisis. The leader hesitated, her gaze sweeping over the group of determined humans before finally settling on Syra. "Very well," she said at last, her tone icy but resigned. "Prove yourselves, fail, and you will face the consequences." With those chilling words, she turned and gestured for her guards to stand down, leaving the settlers standing amidst the ruins of the barrier they had shattered. As the retreated, Daniel exhaled a shaky breath, realizing the stakes had never been higher. Humanity's fate rested on their ability to rise above fear and mistrust, to prove that their ingenuity, resilience, and compassion were forces to be reckoned with. But deep down, Daniel knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The challenge laid down by the Valoran leader hung heavy in the air, a gauntlet thrown at humanity's feet. Daniel and his team knew they had been given a chance, not just to save themselves, but to redefine how humans were perceived on Valora. Failure was not an option. It would mean the end of their settlement, and perhaps the extinction of humanity itself. Success, however, could change everything for both species. As the settlers regrouped near the edge of the crystalline forest, the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on them. They had disrupted the experiment, yes, but now they needed to offer something better, viable alternative, that proved their worth without sacrificing the planet or its ecosystems. "We need ideas," Mara said, pacing back and forth as the group gathered around her. "Something bold, something smart, something that shows we're more than survivors, we're problem solvers." Elias scratched his head, staring at the makeshift device that had destabilized the barrier. "What? If we tweak this thing, use it as a blueprint for stabilizing the energy field instead of breaking it?" Lila shook her head. "It's too risky. If we mess up, we could make the situation worse. Besides, do we even know enough about their tech to pull that off?" Daniel frowned, deep in thought. Then, he turned to Syra, who stood quietly nearby, observing the discussion with keen interest. "You've seen our ingenuity before," he said. "Do you think there's any way we could adapt your technology, use it differently?" Syra hesitated, her luminous eyes flickering between the settlers and the distant crystal tower. Finally, she nodded slowly. "There is another method. My people have experimented with harmonic resonance, a way to balance energy fields rather than amplify them. But it requires precision, fine-tuning beyond what your tools can achieve." "Then teach us," Daniel urged. "We'll find a way to bridge the gap." For a moment, Syra looked conflicted. Helping them further would put her directly at odds with her own kind. Yet, when she glanced at the determined faces of the humans around her, she seemed to come to a decision. "I will guide you," she said softly. "But time is short. You must act quickly." Over the next several hours, the settlers worked tirelessly under Silra's guidance. She explained the principles of harmonic resonance, demonstrating how specific frequencies could stabilize volatile energy fields. Using this knowledge, Elias modified the existing device, incorporating salvaged parts from abandoned Valeran equipment scavenged during previous expeditions. Leela and Mara coordinated efforts to map out safe zones within the energy field, ensuring their adjustments wouldn't inadvertently harm the surrounding environment. Daniel took charge of communication, relaying updates to Silra while keeping morale high among the team. Despite exhaustion gnawing at them all, the sense of purpose kept them going. For the first time since arriving on Valura, they felt united not just as individuals fighting for survival, but as representatives of a species capable of greatness. By dawn, the modified device was ready. It looked crude compared to Valoran's standards, but its potential was undeniable. As the team prepared to test it, Silra approached Daniel, her expression unreadable, yet tinged with concern. "This is your moment," she said quietly. "If this works, my people will see you differently. But remember, actions speak louder than words. Prove to them why humanity deserves respect." With those parting words, she stepped back, allowing the settlers to take center stage. The scene at the Crystal Tower was tense but eerily quiet. The Valoran leader stood watchfully nearby, flanked by guards whose weapons remained lowered for now. Around them, the golden barrier flickered weakly, its instability threatening to spiral out of control once again. Taking a deep breath, Daniel activated the device. A low hum filled the air, growing louder as the machine emitted a steady pulse of energy calibrated to harmonize with the field. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly but surely, the barrier began to stabilize. Its chaotic fluctuations smoothed into a steady glow, radiating outward in gentle waves. The transformation was mesmerizing, unmistakable. Even the Valerans couldn't hide their astonishment. Murmurs rippled through their ranks as they watched the once chaotic energy field settle into equilibrium. "It's working," Lila breathed, her voice trembling with awe. Mara placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder, pride shining in her eyes. "You did it." But the real breakthrough came moments later, when the Valeran leader stepped forward, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, she simply observed the stabilized barrier, her gaze shifting between the humans and Silra. Then, finally, she spoke. "You have accomplished what we deemed impossible," she admitted, her melodic voice carrying a note of grudging respect. "Not through brute force, but through innovation and collaboration. Perhaps we underestimated you." Her words sent a ripple of hope through the settlers. Though cautious, they allowed themselves to believe, for the first time, that coexistence might truly be possible. Silra stepped forward then, addressing her leader directly. "This proves that progress does not require destruction. Together, we can build a future that benefits everyone." The leader hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Very well, we will reconsider our approach. But know this, trust must be earned, not given freely." As the Valerans withdrew, leaving the settlers standing amidst the glow of their success, Daniel felt a surge of emotion. Humanity hadn't just survived, they had thrived, and in doing so, they had taken the first step toward proving their place in the galaxy. The journey was far from over. But one truth was undeniable: humanity's resilience, creativity, and heart had changed the game forever. The days that followed were unlike anything the settlers had experienced since arriving on Vil. The once hostile atmosphere between humans and Valerans began to shift, subtle but undeniable. Patrols near the settlement became less frequent, and when they did occur, the guards no longer carried an air of disdain. Instead, there was curiosity, newfound interest in understanding these flickers who had proven themselves capable of more than anyone expected. For Daniel and his companions, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, though nothing felt quite the same. The weight of what they had achieved lingered, a constant reminder that humanity's actions had altered the course of their future and, perhaps, the future of Valora itself. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting the crystalline forest in hues of amber and violet, Daniel found himself standing by the glowing riverbank. It was the same spot where he had first encountered Silra, the place where everything had begun. He wasn't alone for long. Moments later, she appeared, her metallic skin shimmering faintly in the twilight. "You've done something remarkable," she said softly, her melodic voice carrying a note of admiration. not just for your people, but for mine as well. Daniel shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. We couldn't have done it without you. You took a risk helping us. Why? Scylla hesitated, her luminous eyes reflecting the fading light. Because I saw something in you that my people often overlook. Humanity isn't defined by its limitations or its fragility. It's defined by its ability to adapt, to persevere, to care for one another even when the odds seem insurmountable. That is worth protecting. Her words struck a chord deep within him, filling him with a quiet sense of pride. For so long, humanity had been dismissed as insignificant, unworthy of respect. But now, thanks to their ingenuity and courage, they had earned a seat at the table. What happens next? Daniel asked after a pause. That depends on both our peoples, Scylla replied. There will be challenges, ahead, doubts, disagreements, perhaps even setbacks. But this moment, it changes everything. My leader may not admit it openly, but she respects what you've accomplished, and others will follow her lead. Daniel nodded, gazing out over the glowing river. Do you think we can really build something together? A future where humans and Valorans coexist? Scylla stepped closer, her expression thoughtful yet hopeful. Coexistence isn't easy. It requires trust, patience, and compromise. But if there's one thing I've learned from watching you, it's that humanity doesn't shy away from hard work. If anyone can make it happen, it's you. Her words lingered in the cool evening air, a promise and a challenge wrapped into one. As they stood side by side, two beings from vastly different worlds united by a shared vision. The enormity of what lay ahead didn't feel quite so daunting. Back at the settlement, the mood was celebratory yet reflective. Fires crackled in the center of the community, their warm glow contrasting with the cool, shimmering light of the crystalline trees. The settlers gathered around, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments of gratitude. Mara raised a hand, calling for attention. Today, we proved something important, not just to the Valorans, but to ourselves. We showed them that humanity isn't weak or expendable. We're resilient, we're resourceful, and above all, we're united. Cheers erupted, echoing through the night. Elias grinned, raising a makeshift cup in a toast. To survival and to kicking some shiny alien butts. Laughter rippled through the crowd, lightening the mood. But amidst the celebration, Lila spoke up, her voice soft but clear. This isn't the end, it's a beginning. A chance to show the galaxy what we're truly made of. Her words resonated deeply, reminding everyone that while the battle had been won, the war for acceptance and equality was far from over. Yet, for the first time, hope burned brightly in their hearts, a beacon, guiding them toward a brighter future. As the fires dimmed and the stars emerged, twinkling like distant promises, Daniel looked up at the vast expanse of the Valoran sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the boundaries of this planet, countless other worlds awaited discovery. Worlds where humanity might one day stand, not as refugees or underdogs, but as equals. And as he turned to join his friends, he realized something profound. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't its technology, its weapons, or even its resilience. It was its heart, the unyielding belief that no matter how dire the circumstances, there was always a way forward. In the end, it wasn't about proving superiority or dominance. It was about connection, understanding, and the shared desire to build something better for everyone. Wow, Daniel whispered to himself, a wistful smile playing on his lips. She was right. And somewhere, across the glowing river, Scylla smiled too.